Yo, welcome back to the channel. It is your boy Streakholder Nate, and today we are going to talk about event listeners. So we already talked about DOM events. Now we're talking about event listeners. Let's hop into the session. Okay, so JavaScript DOM event listeners. What the hell are they? Well, let's take a look. So we have this add event listener. That is a function in JavaScript, add event listener. In our previous video, we talked about DOM events and how we can hook up or we can listen to certain events by setting the onclick. We can listen to the onclick event by setting the onclick attribute equal to a JavaScript function. That's us listening to the event and then handling the event with the JavaScript function. So what is this add event listener method? Well, before we saw that on click is an attribute because we say dot on click equals. And so here we're talking about a method. And so add event listener, in my eyes, is probably just going to be the method way of adding an event listener versus the attribute way of where we say take the attribute on click and set it equal to this function. We're going to use a function call to do all of that at once. Let's see. And so we have add an event listener that fires when a user clicks a button. And so we knew how to do that before, which was document.getElement by ID dot on click equals display name. But now they're showing us something totally different. They're showing us this one keyword right here that says, or that is add event listener. So our elements, each element, get element by ID, each element has a add event listener. And it looks like that the first parameter to add event listener is what do we want to listen to? And it doesn't look like we have to say on this or on that. We just have to say what event it is. And this is the click event. And as you can see, there's a comma. That comma means that there's another parameter. And that other parameter is right there, which is display date, right? And so display date is a function. And so let's run this. Let's try this out. Let's move myself over here. Okay. And so we got over here, we got JavaScript, add event listener, and then we got this p tag that adds the event. So this part, then this part, and then we got this button, and then script. Cool. All right, so we got the script, document.getElement by ID, my button. So where's element by ID? My button right here. So we got my button, and what we're going to do is add this event listener where it's going to be the click and it's going to display date. What is this display date? Well, display date gets the demo. In the demo, it's just this p tag that's not showing up anywhere right now, and it's just going to put the date inside the p tag. So let's just run that, and it puts the date right inside the p tag. So that's real cool. And honestly, you just see something real dope. You just saw like how something just popped up on the screen. You've seen this before, right? In coding, you seen just, or as you was just using a website and you was clicking stuff and pop-ups was coming up all over the place. This is how it's done. This is literally how it's done. Like and if we styled that up with some CSS and threw a little bit of animation on when it came onto the screen, you done created you a little pop-up based off of clicking on a try me. And it stays dynamic. As you can see, the time updates as I click. Cool. All right. Just giving out all my damn where I'm at. All right. So I guess it just showed that I'm in CDT. But okay, cool. Okay, so the add event listener. So we just saw add event listener in action. So let's read a little bit about it in theory. So add event listener method attaches an event handler to the specified element. So we're going to attach an event handler. Remember, an event handler is just a function that is ran to handle the signal that was given off. That's all it is. So the add event listener method attaches an event handler. Let's replace that with attaches a function to the specified element when that element event is fired. or actually to that element's event, right? And so the add event listener method attaches an event handler to an element without overriding existing event handlers. Meaning, if you already had an event handler for onclick and you made another onclick event handler, now you have two onclick event handlers for that specific element. You can add many event handlers to one event. Well, I just said that right there. And you can add many event handlers of the same type to one element. In other words, two click events. You can add event listeners to any DOM object, not only HTML objects. So what does it mean by any DOM object? Not only HTML object. Well, so far we only talked about HTML or the DOM only HTML objects. But the thing is, the DOM can also owns other objects. And what you can see right here, JS in the browser or in the JS browser, which stands for browser object model, is that we're going to get access to the window. We get access to the screen. We get access to the location, the history, the navigator, pop-up alert, timing, and cookies. And so the DOM, we not only can add event listeners to those HTML elements, but we can also add it to the window. What is the window? The window is that's this whole bitch right here that's loading. The window is the browser. Is like the browser has the window, and you can do all types of things to it, and then the cookies and all that stuff. So we can add events to those things, and we could watch those things, and we could watch for different events on those things. The add event listener method makes it easier to control how the event reacts to bubbling. What is bubbling? We're gonna talk about bubbling soon. When using the add event listener method, the JavaScript is separated from the HTML markup for better readability and allows you to add event listeners even when you do not control the HTML markup. You can easily remove an event listener by using the remove event listener method. Just like that. Okay, so here's the syntax, the element. What is the element? Well, we got the element by document.getElement or document.select or query select, right? That gives us our element. Then we run the add event listener. The first parameter to add event listener is the event. The second parameter is the function that we want to run once the event is finished. And then the use capture is for bubbling. And bubbling refers back to, let's say, nesting. You got a div and then you got an H1 inside a div. Well, if you put an onclick handler on the H1 and you put an onclick handler on the div, which one fires when you click on the H1? Because the H1 is technically, you're technically clicking on the div, right? And so this thing called bubbling, and it's like, which one fires first? Does the H1 on click fire first, or does the div click fire first? And in terms of bubbling says that the inner one fires and then bubbles out. And then there's another phrase that's what is it that refers event capturing. So you can either do bubbling or capturing, and capturing does from the top down, so it would hit the div and then the H1. So that's what that refers to. But by default, this is bubbling, and you kind of want to keep it bubbling unless you need to do something specific that way. Cool. So add an event handler to an element. So alert hello world. So we got the element that add event listener, and we're going to say click, and what we do is we pass a function. And typically, people pass anonymous functions. So the way you create an anonymous function is by saying the keyword function. I shouldn't even break this down for y'all because I already kind of did before, but function, and then curly bracket, which the code you want to write, and then close it off with the curly bracket over there. So that's how we're going to pass that in. And look, this is the function. This is the full function we passed in. This is the second parameter. And then we close the add event listener right here with this parenthesis right there. So don't get this confused. I know a lot of people get confused with passing anonymous functions. I just use an arrow function to begin with, which will take this function keyword off and put an arrow in between this, and it's the same thing. But yeah. So this is add event listener. So the old one we saw was element dot on click equals whatever function that we had defined, right? we could say element dot on click equals this function right there. But instead, what we're saying is element dot add event listener, which is a function, a method, and it says what event do you want to listen to. We say we want to listen to the click event, and then it says what do you want to do when you want to listen to that click event, and we would say we want to run this set of procedures right here. So that's that. Okay, so now that we seen add event listener and action, not only can we pass anonymous functions, but we can also pass functions that are anonymous, but that have a name. But so here we have function, and then the name is my function. And so we have element.add event listener, click, and on click, we want to run my function, and my function is just going to alert hello world. So these two are one and the same, right? This one has a defines the function, while the one above is just while this one is just an anonymous functions passed in. Same thing. I would say get used to writing anonymous functions because you're gonna see them all over the place when you're looking at code. Okay. And so add many event handlers to the same element. So you can add as many event handlers as you want to. You see element.add event listener, and we can add click multiple times. We can add hover, we can add or on mouse hover or mouse over, click, here you go. So of different types, element, you can see mouse over, click, mouse out. We can add all types of events, and we can listen. There's no limit on what we can listen to on any element, and we can do this to all elements. That's dope. So add an event handler to the window object. We're not about to do that to the window because we didn't really listen, or we didn't really learn about the window. So we're gonna come back to the window, as you can see right up there. I'm gonna come to the window one day. All right, passing parameters. When passing parameter values, use an anonymous function that calls the specified function with the parameters. So basically this is saying is if your event handler has parameters that you need to pass in, well, call an anonymous function or pass an anonymous function to your event handler, because your event handler needs a reference. An anonymous function is a reference. You get a reference to that function, right? And so you can't really pass values to a reference. So what we do is we get the reference, we create an anonymous function, which is a reference, and then we call the actual function that we want to call inside of that reference with the data passed in, so that the function isn't just running right here. Like you pass on add event listener takes a click event, or it takes a string for the first parameter, and it takes a function reference for the second parameter, and a function reference being something that is executable, some lines that are lines of code that are executable once the event happens. But we don't want that code to execute right away. And if we pass my function, like let me show you actually, you see that here we have my function is passed, but it isn't passed with the parameters, right? My function is a function, but it isn't passed with like the parentheses. And the reason it isn't passed with the parentheses is because we're passing a reference, and we're saying that on click run this function. And if we would have passed the parentheses, basically this would run this function right now. And then this would be like, it would be on click, and then this function will run like literally right now. And it wouldn't wait to run when the click event. So we have to give it a reference, and then once the click event happens, we go to that reference and run that code. Well, what if that code, well here in this example didn't have any parameters. So it was cool that we could just pass the word my function. But what if the code does have parameters? Let's say here, my function now takes in P1 and P2. How will we pass that, right? How will we pass my function like we did? How will we pass my function here with the two parameters? without calling it. Well, the way that we do that is giving it an anonymous function. So we give this an anonymous function. An anonymous function is just a reference, and so or the anonymous function returns a reference to where that function is. And so here's our reference, and inside our reference, we can call the actual the procedure to run inside the method or inside the reference is the my function with the two parameters passed in. I know it's a little choppy, but that's really how you pass a function or pass an event handler with parameters. It really confused me at first too. And I think I learned this in I learned this in React first before I learned it in JavaScript. So, which is wild because React is JavaScript. Okay. Or I guess I seen that concept first in React before I seen it in JavaScript. Okay. And then I already pretty much explained event handling versus capturing to y'all. So we're not about to go through that. And then you could also remove events, event listeners. Yep, cool. I think that's about it. So yeah, I mean, we got through this one. This one wasn't too bad. This was really just, I just wanted to show y'all the JavaScript way, the more JavaScript way of adding an event to your elements and listening to those events and how we do that for real. So now you really got the syntax down, you got the DOM down, you got event handling down. Man, y'all beasting. Y'all about to be so impressive. I'm telling you, a lot of programmers, a lot of programmers do not know this stuff. So if y'all getting this down and y'all understanding, y'all own something, man. Y'all really are on to it. But like always, hit that like, subscribe, follow your boy on the gram, and I'm gonna see y'all next time. Peace.